All right, here we are with topic 3, New Deal programs. We're going to look at some of the things that the government does under FDR to get the country out of the Great Depression. Before we get to FDR, we need to first look at President Herbert Hoover, who was president before FDR was. During the initial years of the Depression, he didn't feel that it was the government's responsibility to get involved and help people. He relied on private charities, kind of like soup kitchens and churches. And he felt that, like the rest of the people at the time, that it wasn't a serious problem, it wasn't going to last long, all right, and that, the people could be responsible for helping one another, okay? 2 ways that he loses support as president. The first one, right, people protest his policies by building Hoovervilles. Here's a Hooverville down here, which was simply just, shanties. People lost everything, right? So in the form of protest, they would build these shanties and you get a small neighborhood together referred to as a Hooverville, right? This political cartoon is also kind of touching on the Hooverville idea in that, people are struggling, but the president really kind of can't identify with the people, right? So he's kind of losing out and losing focus on what the people themselves need. And another incident that shows the problems he has is the bonus army. Now, this was a group of World War I veterans who were guaranteed a bonus, right? And they actually apply for their bonus early because of the Great Depression, and the government's actually going to deny them, right? So that turns into a big deal as well. Hoover does accomplish some things during his presidency. One is the construction of the Hoover Dam. All right, the name is actually it's changed a couple times. It starts off as the Boulder Dam, comes back as the Hoover Dam. Should look familiar. It was in the movie Transformers. They actually have Megatron still stuck inside there. Those of you that have seen Transformers, you get my joke, right? So he did believe in public works, right? That would probably be the extent that he wanted to get involved, right? Then along comes President Franklin D. Roosevelt, which is going to abbreviate him as FDR, all right? You made it when you can just be referred to as your initials. FDR is going to be the exact opposite of Herbert Hoover. He's going to be active and get involved in trying to stop. So I kind of identified the 3 big important things we need to know about FDR. First one is he declares a bank holiday, which means he closes all banks. Think about it like a holiday from school, right? Basically, if you remember back to topic 1, all those banks were closing, people were losing their life savings, so he just shuts down every single bank in the country. And he won't let it reopen until it's a sound bank that can protect all of its money. Another thing he does is he engages in what was known as fireside chats, which really kind of influences FDR influences every president since. All right, this was simply, connection with people. Right, he would give a daily, a weekly address, depending on how often he needed to the American people, right, through the radio. And he would simply tell them what the government was doing to try and help them. And this was like a sense of transparency or a sense of communication between the government and the people, where he was telling them, directly, this is what I'm trying to do to help you. And we know that through the Roaring '20s, everybody had access to a radio. So this was really the first step where a president was, and then look at how far we've come today. President Obama has a Facebook and a Twitter. All right, and a YouTube channel, and he's in constant communication. So it could all be traced back to his fireside chats, right, connecting with the American people. And the last concept is deficit spending. Now that's a fancy high school economics term, but it simply means spending money you don't have. All right, so this would be the government spending money, right? Essentially more money than they're getting back in taxes. Right, but the money would go to trying to pay for programs to pull the country out of the Great Depression. So the idea that the government is going to start spending more money is what I'm trying to get at here. All right. This is a pretty interesting cartoon that kind of hits the nail on the head. This is President Franklin D. Roosevelt here. He's on his way to the White House. And what's waiting for him? All right, all these problems. You can see unemployment, war debt, taxation, tariff, prohibition. Right, all problems he had to face immediately. That's a pretty daunting task there. Okay, I want you to pause this and go back over. This is kind of comparing Hoover with Roosevelt, right? And here's the problem right here, how each of them responded. You need to pay close attention to how FDR is going to respond. All right, and then the last part we're getting to is his actual New Deal. Right, this was his plan on how he was going to get the government out of the Great Depression. Look at it this way. The old deal got us into a depression, so he's going to come up with a brand new deal to get us out of it. And it's going to focus on three words. And Mrs. Amick and I were clever, making it easy enough for you that we kind of tied them all to a little alliteration here. So Ms. Elston would be proud. Okay, the first one is relief. Okay, if you think baseball, a relief pitcher comes in when the starting pitcher needs help, but relief would be help for the needy. Okay, those people who are struggling right now and need help from the government, that's going to be one of the first things. Second one is reform. All right, so we got relief. Oh, no, excuse me. Got ahead of myself. This is recovery. Sorry if you had to erase that there. Okay, this would be bring the economy back. How can we get people back to work, get the economy strong again? And the last one is reform. That's an R. That's my guy handwriting again. Right? Reform means to change. All right, so let's make changes to avoid another depression. To avoid. All right, so can we do things? Can we change things to prevent a future depression from happening? And some programs are going to come out of this one that are still around today and have since prevented another Great Depression from happening. Okay, this is just an idea. Once again, I want you to pause. Right, this is showing you a lot of his, and we're going to do these in a lot more detail. Obviously, that's what I said before. Right, these are showing his government programs. Right, he actually had 2 New Deals. Right, but you can see, all right, a lot of these programs are aimed at different walks of life. All right, and then just kind of holistically looking at everything again. All right, the legacy. We talked about the deficit, the idea of deficit spending. That would be spending tax money to help people, right? This is something we're going to look at in class as well. One of the complaints that people had was that the New Deal gave too much government control or too much government power. Too much government power, meaning an influence in the economy. Too much say, too much voice, right? And then this is probably the big and important New Deal program that you need to know about because it's still around today. The Social Security Act. Still around, and that benefits millions of Americans every year. And then here would be the reform, right? The FDIC and which is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, right here. We're going to talk about that when we talk about banks. And the SEC, which is the Securities Exchange Commission, which monitors the stock market. All right. So you can see there's a lot going on with FDR's New Deal programs. Basically, what you need to understand is that there were some people who supported it, some people who were against it, but really the goal was to get the country out of the Depression, which takes a while, but does eventually happen.